I've been on a bunch of baseball teams, and I can think of a few that I was on where we were terrible at the beginning. Just, they weren't bad people or anything. We just weren't very good at baseball. We didn't understand where to be. It wasn't cohesive. When we came out to warm up and take infield, nobody really knew what to do. And it just looked what you call in the baseball biz, bush league. It looks bad. But on these couple of teams that I played on, we had really good coaching. And over time, everybody figured out where they were supposed to be and what they're supposed to do. And even if we weren't the best at baseball, it looked like a very well-organized product. Like everybody understood their role and like we were getting the best out of what we had to work with by the end of the season. It was very satisfying. I remember being out there at shortstop, taking infield and getting, all set to play the last game of our season with one of these teams and looking around and being like, this is really cool. We've come a long ways. Everything is working. We might not beat this team, but everything is working, and we've done the very best once again with what we have. It's a very cool thing. Likewise, in Nehemiah chapter 12, we get that kind of moment where we can stop from our metaphorical shortstop position, then look around the metaphorical ball field and say, this feels different than the rest of the Old Testament because everyone is where they're supposed to be. This ragtag band has become really fairly polished. Everyone understands their role and their tasks. Everyone is communicating well. The leadership and coaching is strong. And all the things that need to be accomplished are being accomplished. We're all pulling in the same direction for maybe the first time in the Old Testament. Certainly one of very few occasions in the Old Testament where we're all pulling together, but at times well, because it's at the end of the Old Testament, and you hope that you kind of peak at the end of the season, right? So this is exciting. So we're at the end of Nehemiah chapter 12. We're in the process of rededicating the walls. It's a beautiful ceremony that Nehemiah, apparently a master ceremony planner, has put a ton of thought into. He's pulled it off. He went and got the best musicians and put together a couple of choirs and a whole bunch of pageantry. Everybody's really feeling pretty good about how all of this stuff is going. There's a bunch of people involved. So I'm just going to take you to the end of the chapter here from Nehemiah 12:40. That's some ground we've already covered a little bit, but it seems like a natural place to pick up all the way to the end of the chapter. And as I do, just think about that metaphor that I threw out. Just think about what we've seen throughout the rest of the Old Testament and how meaningful it would have been for these folks who were rooted in this story to get this moment of payoff, to get this moment of, everything is working. Because I think it's pretty cool. Nehemiah 12, verse 40. The two choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God, and so did I, Nehemiah, together with half the officials, as well as the priests. Here we go. Eliakim, Maaseiah, Miniamin, Micaiah, Elionai, Zechariah, and Hananiah with their trumpets, and also Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzai, Jehohanan, Malchijah, Elam, and Ezer. The choirs sang under the direction of Jezreiah. And on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. Remember, there's no ambiguity now, like there was at the dedication of the temple foundation back in Ezra 3, where you couldn't really tell if we were happy about this or things were bad. The jury was still out. Things were not all where they needed to be. The metaphorical infield practice before the ball game officially starts did not communicate certainty that this was going to work out, but now it's unambiguous. Everybody's celebrating. That's the message that Jerusalem is projecting to their neighbors, their enemies, and the rest of the world. With that comes an implicit invitation in keeping with the prophecies of Zechariah and Isaiah, and indeed even keeping with the original covenant God made with Abraham, the guy who started this whole thing, the father of this entire group of people, saying that they would be a blessing to all the nations. Now that is in place. It's been a ragtag journey. Some of the games and practices have been pretty ugly. There's been some suspensions and fines and dirt and brawling and even violence. But here we are. And now everybody's celebrating. Cool. We keep going. Nehemiah 12:44. At that time, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, first fruits, and tithes. We know from how things played out with Judas in the New Testament that that's a role of pretty big trust and a really easy one to take advantage of. We shouldn't just breeze by this verse. This is great. Somebody is able to play that position. What is needed for that position? Well, probably two things: massive organizational competence and also massive integrity. If there aren't people who have both of those things, you can't really fill that position in your roster. But now they have those people and they have enough of them that they can do this with confidence. That's a huge win. That's easy to overlook. From the fields around the towns, they were to bring into the storerooms the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah was pleased with the ministering priests and Levites. Awesome. Again, the roster's filled out. Those are difficult positions to fill, priest and Levite. And yet we seem to have plenty of them, and they seem to have integrity and competence. They seem to understand the law, and because other teammates are playing their roles, their positions well, they also have the funding and the supplies that they need to be set up to do what they're supposed to do. This is great. Verse 45, they performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did also the singers and gatekeepers, according to the commands of David and his son Solomon. Well, in the same way that on a baseball field, generally speaking, the skill set that goes along with playing first base is pretty different than the skill set that goes along with being a pitcher. So I don't expect a Levite or a bean counter who handles the storerooms, maybe literally a bean counter. I don't expect them to have the skill set needed to lead the people in singing and art and music to the standards laid out in ancient times by David and Solomon. That's a different position. And what do you know? Maybe in keeping with the reality that little villages, according to verse 29 of Nehemiah 12, had sprung up where the musicians and artists worked together and honed their craft and wrote cool music. Maybe partly as a reflection of that, we're now able to fill this position on the roster with people with talent and integrity suited to the position. Look at this. We seem like a real bona fide team that's worthy of being on the field. This is great. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there had been directors for the singers and for the songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. Okay, David and Asaph are the two names that you see the most in the book of Psalms. Again, the book of Psalms was probably reaching its final form, being filled out to its full robustity at this time. In fact, there are some people who suggest that maybe even Ezra the priest was the guy or one of the guys who really finalized the book of Psalms as we see it today. Could be. I don't know. What this means is these guys had to hone a very specific set of skills, and they had to have a very specific, narrow collection of knowledge to do their jobs well. And there's just not enough hours in the day for everybody to be equally good at this. This roster that we're looking at here, the needs to field a good team here, is one that requires serious specialization. And further down the list we go, the more we see that apparently that degree of specialization was occurring. Verse 47. So in the days of Zerubbabel and of Nehemiah, so we're talking about 538 to the mid 5 teens BC, and then we're jumping ahead when we talk about Nehemiah to the 440s BC, a few generations apart. So basically, over this almost 100-year span that has a couple of eras in it, dominated by these big personalities, Zerubbabel and Nehemiah. In those days, all Israel contributed the daily portions for the singers and gatekeepers. They also set aside the portion for the other Levites, and the Levites set aside the portion for the descendants of Aaron. To stretch my analogy even further, they're playing complementary baseball. It's okay if you're not a sports person, you don't know what that term means, but you hear it in football, baseball, any team sport really. Complementary sports means your defense fuels your offense. How you handle things in one specific phase of the game informs and improves how you're able to handle things in other specific phases of the game. And you can only do that if you have highly talented, highly specialized players in all of those diverse and unique roles required to field a team. Again, in our case, the metaphor we've been going with is a baseball team. Well, that's it. That's Nehemiah chapter 12, and it ends on this really positive note. The provisions are being made. It started back with Zerubbabel, but now it's really humming during the time of Nehemiah. And we have all the talent we need to do this stuff. We seem to have all kinds of integrity. There seems to be a public expectation of integrity at a level that maybe we haven't seen in a while. We don't have any prophets being recorded as needing to show up during this time and yell at people because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. I mean, it seems like everybody's really on the same page. And if we imagine Nehemiah and Ezra to be the coaches out there warming up the team, banging ground balls across the infield and hitting fly balls, and we can imagine cleanly cut grass, beautiful blue sky. Everything smells like the fresh cut grass and like leather. It smells like a ball game. Everything feels like it's where it ought to be. The lines are chalked up properly. The ball is popping the glove. Everybody's hitting the cutoff man. It's okay, again, if you don't know what all of these examples mean. The crack of the bat is crisp. The chatter on the infield is lively and positive and clear and refined. If you've ever been around baseball, you know that that is what a sharp, well-prepared, unified, well-rostered team looks like. And I get the sense that the original audience would have felt the same way. That is sharp. That is crisp. We got there. Everybody's doing what they need to do. We're playing complementary ball. We are equipped for what's next for the first time in forever. And this is a moment of great celebration for the people who were there, and really for anybody who's reading this, either the original audience or you and I. Did you know that Nehemiah has 13 chapters? Since we just finished 12, that means we're going to start the last chapter of this book and of this season next time around. And then won't be long after that, and we're getting into Galatians, which I'm also very excited about. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.